Well, it's true. You've done it here again. You're back to Coffee with Humans with my new friend, Annette. Annette, welcome to Coffee with Humans.
Hello, nice to be here.
Well, one big question for all our viewers and listeners, they need to know that I don't know you yet. We've talked about nothing prior to the broadcast, and now we're live. And so I'm very, very curious. Why did you choose to click the button to have coffee with me?
Okay. Part of our outreach in LinkedIn, we're always sort of searching for interesting people that might be on a mission or something that we can possibly work with or collaborate with. And I came across you and I looked at your website, and then me and you had a conversation that was wildly different to what I kind of thought it might be. So I knew that jumping on here would be the same experience, that it would just go somewhere not expected. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. So welcome to Coffee with Humans. Now, when you signed up to be on Coffee with Humans, the system asked you a handful of questions. One of which was, if your life were a novel, what would one of the chapters be titled? I'm always so curious to hear what everybody puts into there. Yours was "The Warrior and Sage Stop for Tea." What's behind all that?
I think because there's two little things there. One, obviously, with my accent, I'm actually British, obviously. So we tend to be more tea than coffee. So that was a little bit of a sort of an ironic play on the coffee and the tea thing. And also, I guess with the whole, dojo thing, warriorship is something that kind of is the obvious one, but I think more the sage side in terms of wisdom seeking and so on might not be the most common. And I felt that the conversations that you have, border on a lot of different topics and aspects. So I thought that was a good fit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The topics that have been discussed are widely varied. I think we've discussed people who are in career transition, looking to see what might come next. We've discussed people who are recovering alcoholics, and people who deal with big issues. And then we've just kind of talked about nonsensical things as well. So Coffee with Humans, we can discuss anything you like. So what's on your mind today? What's resonating? Okay. It's morning for me. I mean, you're in the UK, so it's 8 a.m. right now. What time is it for you?
It's nearly 2 o'clock.
All right, so it's tea time.
Kind of. Well, any time's kind of tea time in the UK, just the same as coffee. I mean, there's a lot of coffee drinkers here, obviously, but it's just more traditional for have tea. But I think from this perspective, I was really interested to go down the path of consciousness in leadership, life, and business, and see where you take it. Because I remember having this discussion about people's missions, and we had a conversation about that not everybody is cut out necessarily to be an entrepreneur, nor should they be. And I think based on both of our backgrounds and things that we did, I just think it's a really interesting time and space right now for people, where they're at and what they're thinking about doing next, or whether they're thinking of transitioning to something, or just what's available out there, and where we should be headed, really.
Yeah, those are big topics. This consciousness, that's an interesting, that's an interesting one. And we had a bit of we went pretty deep in our last discussion, and I don't meet everybody prior to. Some people I know very well prior to Coffee with Humans. Some people I don't know from anybody prior to Coffee with Humans. But we got pretty deep. Now this consciousness thing, that seems a weighty topic. And then career transitions and what do I do next with my life, and whether I think we touched on did we get into how we got into reality and shaping decisions, and where did we head with that? There was an intense conversation. I think
Yeah, which is why I think it was interesting, and I kind of wanted to bring it over into here, because I think we can start at something that's seemingly small, but it's kind of not,
Hmm.
in the sense of what do I do? What do I choose? What am I consciously creating and shaping, versus the whole aspect of when we look externally and we look at the planet, and let's say we look at wars or government or this and that and the other, we can actually be a lot of people can get overwhelmed with that, and not feel that one person can make a difference. But one of the conversation pieces I think that we had was this discussion that actually what is right for the individual is actually right for the planet. And we had this conversation where I was talking about being mission driven, and then you was talking about, yeah, but if somebody just wanted to be a mom and there shouldn't necessarily be an entrepreneur, that should be enough. And it seemed like we was on a different page, but we actually weren't, because to me that would be that person's mission, and it all counts. And I think that from a consciousness perspective, for me, it's about having that awareness in your choices and what is right for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting timing that you are here today, because yesterday, so I took the last about 3 months and wrote a book. And
Okay.
I'm so excited to have this book finally done, because I've started 3 or 4 manuscripts through the years, and all of them have come to like 3,000 words. And then I'm like, this is terrible. No one wants to hear this. I don't even want to hear it. I don't know what I'm talking about anyhow. Uh, and now I've got 60,000 words or something like that. So I've got like a 200 some odd page book.
Right.
And the title, the working title that I have so far, is What Could Be.
Right. Okay.
And I finished reading all of my chapters yesterday, so it's ready to go to editing next week. And one of the big topics is how do you find purpose and meaning in your work, or your existence for that matter, and how do you transition sometimes through challenging circumstances, things times you really didn't want to find yourself, or circumstances you really didn't want to find yourself in, either that you created or were created for you. And in that search for meaning and purpose, one of the things that drew out is that it is a statistical impossibility that you exist. It is furthermore a statistical possibility that I would exist and we would be having this conversation. And furthermore, it is wildly impossible that any of us would be on a search for meaning, unless meaning were to be able to be found, and it was vitally important that we went after it. And so one of the things I brought out of the book is it's vitally important that you're here and on this search for meaning and purpose in your life.
Yeah.
which is an interesting thought, because then when you find meaning and purpose, what does that look like? And I think in Western cultures, it's turned into jobs.
Yes.
Whereas historically, work is definitely part of life. It's a necessary part of life, but meaning and purpose is much bigger than your job.
Absolutely. And I think for me, that's where they dovetail from, and this is purely an entrepreneurial perspective, but this is where it dovetails into the mission part. Because if you feel you have purpose and meaning, and therefore you're on some kind of mission and you are an entrepreneur, then there's obviously certain things that you want to do. If you don't consider yourself to be an entrepreneur, and as you said, your purpose and meaning is in family contribution, different areas, then that is all equally as important. I feel that when we talk about happiness, health, well-being, all these different aspects, I just honestly feel there's a huge correlation between that and the individual's life having meaning and purpose. Because I feel like if you are on some sort of path that you are not happy with, and you have a lot of negativity around it, or toxic people, or so on and so forth, we know that the energy that gets trapped inside the bodies can produce ill health and illness and so on and so forth. So for me, I think that right from a child, it is essential that we allow each individual to be able to explore and express themselves and find what gives them meaning and purpose. And it's fine as well if that changes over time, and it's fine as well if you explore. And it's like one of my daughters doing an art course, and I said, okay, so you might do 10 different mediums on there. It doesn't mean you're going to love all of them. It just might mean that 2 you absolutely adore, or 2 you can't stand, 1 you might not be any good at, but that's irrelevant. It's about the experience. So I think a lot of times in life, particularly as you said from a Western perspective, it's almost forced container that you've got to hit certain things at certain times, and then it's all done. Whereas actually the whole unfolding of life is much more of a part of the mysteries and part of an ongoing journey. But if you find meaning and purpose, then I feel that I always say to people that, the mission's bigger than you, meaning that you've been given these things because you can do them, but likely at the same time, you're also going to come up with those human challenges and obstacles because they are for you. And therefore, to kind of really maximize that mission and that meaning, you're the one that's going to have to venture through them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Your point that we've, in our Western culture, you talked about this like container. And it's like it's like a defined path that we're all supposed to go down. Instead of exploring like a child. When I was a kid, I would go down to the local creek, near my house, and spend the day there, until mom would call me home, doing whatever, tinkering around with toys or animals. I would drag, crayfish and other, and fish and snails and stuff back to the house sometimes. And I'd unpack things and look under the microscope, just exploring the world. And that exploration, that sense of discovery is lost because we get into school now that we are supposed to somehow magically divine a career choice, having never done that career. And then spend years studying for that, spending tens of thousands of dollars in some cases, or hundreds of thousands of dollars in worse. And then people get to that career, find, oh, this wasn't what I was looking for. This does not satisfy my soul. And then you end up not using that, not using any of those, those hard skills anyhow. And that path is sort of ridiculous. It's constantly future focused, for one. Because we're like, okay, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Instead of just, going out to, like, today, open up the door. Hey, look, the sun came up. Like, yay. What allow the day to unfold? And why do we have to push so hard for the next thing, and always require ourselves to, be in some cases, these grand vision seekers and planners and all this other stuff. It's an interesting trap that we find ourselves in, because that we work to then go rest, which is like, why don't we just work and then rest kind of all in the same space?
Exactly. And it's interesting what you said about school. I think that particular perspective you've just said, I've never heard anybody say before. And I think it's spot on, this whole thing of people are training for careers that they've never had. So, I mean, how on earth do you know you're going to like something? Haven't experienced it. And this whole pressure, I think, that's put on people, especially kids, to say, okay, you've got to get all these grades, and you've got to do well here, and you've got to go do well there, and whatever. And it kind of almost destroys everything about that individual in a way. If you're not fortunate enough to have an environment that supports who you are. And I also feel, going on that same path, that with the topics as well, it's like most kids quite young figure out what they're kind of interested in and what they're kind of not. And we can see quite easily, oh, that person kind of excels over there, and over here they find that quite difficult. So I've always been a fan of not saying to somebody, okay, so we're up here on this topic, but you're down here on here, so therefore let's spend all our energy over here to try and get you to match it. I would say the opposite. I would say, well, let's drop that, because if you think about, when I think about consciousness in terms of the collective, in terms of the planet, what you are up here at and what you are down here at will be the reverse for somebody else. And therefore, why do we need to get up to here on all these things? We don't, because somebody over there is going to go, actually, that's that. I absolutely love that. You know, give it to me. I'd love to do that all day long. And so this whole thing, I remember getting introduced to that idea when I ran my first dojo of kind of like interdependence and that whole kind of thing of we'll work out what, you know, when I say genius zone, I just mean in terms of what you said about purpose, passion, meaning, the thing that you get the most joy from, and then seek out other people that get joy from the other areas that you might need. For example, if you are running a business, if you're an entrepreneur, and then go give that to them. Because then they're happy, you're happy, everybody's happy. And it's actually a much more creative, innovative and happy dynamic. And especially bringing in the other factor of what you just said about work and rest. I mean, a lot of these things we're talking about are man-made constructs. So it was a constructed thing of education and government and hours we should work and so on and so forth. So I have always felt really strongly that if people just understood their own power and say, actually, we've now decided that we tried that, but we don't like it and we don't think it works. So we want to change that construct. And yet people just seem to feel that these things have been done to us and we can't do anything about them. And again, I think that's why I've got such of a case for the entrepreneur in that sense, because I feel like certain sections of people have to stand up and do something about it. It's probably a little bit more harder if you're in a corporate environment and you're only one person saying, I don't think this work week's very good, and yet everybody else is quite happy with it. You've got a tougher kind of goal there, you know, a tougher thing. But if you are a group of entrepreneurs or business owners that collectively go, yeah, okay, we're all going to try this, we're all going to do that, then eventually that might take hold. But these things do need to be looked at. And as you said from about the rest thing, I mean, that archaic model of school, find a career, staying it until you retire, have a bit of retirement and die. I mean, I'm not surprised most young people come out of school and college nowadays and look at that and go, yeah, no, I don't think I'll be signing up for that. I mean, how inspiring does that sound? I mean, it doesn't, does it?
It sounds terrible, but it is the, you know, the path that seems to be presented to everyone. There's a chapter in my book called Break the Rules.
Okay.
And the premise behind Break the Rules is that, like you talked about, all the rules are made up. We, you know, apart from some principles for the way the universe works, which and the way humans, I believe, are created, and if we go against those, like, things get wildly screwed up. If you stay in those confines, everything else is made up. The roads are made up. The buildings are made up. The jobs are made up. Like, we did all of this stuff. You know, we built the software that runs the internet and the hardware that runs the internet so that you and I can communicate, you know, from across the pond. And that's all very valuable stuff. Very interesting, accomplishes a purpose, can get wildly out of control if left unchecked, and does. But all of these rules are ours. We did this. You have a cat, right?
He's a dog.
I have a dog. Oh, I've got a new puppy.
Have you? How old?
Dude, 4.5 months.
Oh, bless. What kind?
I think he's a shepherd mix.
Oh, right. Oh, bless. So there's good fun.
I'll find a picture of him. But yeah, like all of the rules that we operate by are made up by people like you and me. And then and yet we tend to believe that maybe we can't change those rules because, you know, well, the rules have always been here. And like, even to the point of, you know, the locking the world down for COVID, it was like one day we all had to go into the office and work, you know, 40 hours or whatever, and then get paid. And then the next, it was like, no, you go home, and then we're going to continue to pay you if you can't do your job from home.
I know.
And it's like, wait a second, the rules for the way economies work, they're just made up. And, you know, some of us some of us know that. It's like, that didn't exist. Let's say, you know, the way we work didn't exist, let's say 200 years ago, which is not all that, like, that's a fraction of time.
It is.
Uh,
It is.
and yet we think, wow, this is so permanent. It's like, this is nonsense. It's none of this is permanent. By the way, here's my dog.
Oh, what's his name?
His name is Jeff.
Jeff. Oh, that's cute.
Actually, because so his real name, his full name is Jeffrey,
Right.
because he's smart. But
Okay.
but that sounds unapproachable. So he goes by Jeff because he's fun.
When he's being academic with his glasses, is Jeffrey, and when he's doing
Exactly. That's exactly
Guardian's
right.
just crazy all the time. But, yeah.
Beautiful.
I'm able to shut my door. But yeah, and I think that's a big thing, and I feel when you talk about meaning and purpose, I think that's something that if we can share that message more about this whole made up planet that we're on, to empower people to go, do you know what's wrong with, you might have an idea that is a far better way, but rather than just going, oh, okay, well, that's the way it is, that's the way it's always been, it's never going to change. It should inspire you to say, okay, well, I've done a lot. You might be your area of research. You might be really good at, human productivity, or kind of what you said about energy and resting. And you might have figured out that actually the work week should be, I don't know, 22 hours or something. I don't know. But it's just that I feel very strongly about, we're at a precipice here where COVID is giving people an eye opener and an opportunity to see, oh, okay, so things can be changed like that. Actually, they can. And
Yeah.
we could also have that same power. Just because governments chose to do that, it doesn't mean the people can't.
Right. Yeah, that tangles back in on itself. Who's got the power? And I, to the point of this idea of work and power and persistence of some of these constructs. I think one of the things that can shift, maybe should shift people's minds, is, do I have enough? And do I have enough is built on, am I enough? Because if I have enough, then why am I so hell-bent on pushing for more?
Yeah.
And it's hard to have enough if you don't think you are enough.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not enough, and so I got to go out, prove it in the world by showing you that I am enough. And what's the best way to do that? To get stuff and do things. Because then you look at me and you go, oh, look at, that person is, they're put together. When in fact we're all falling apart on the inside.
Exactly.
Which
that's an external visual that you're creating there, isn't it?
Yeah. Because we all want validation to some degree.
Yeah.
Like, validate me that I'm okay. Yeah. Not knowing that you kind of have no business doing that, because you're also not okay at some point in time. You're just as crazy as the next person. And you've had struggles that you don't want to talk about. And, and if somebody did find that out, you fear that they'd be like, oh, you're not qualified for life. It's like, okay. So we push all that stuff down and present ourselves instead to the world by our jobs and the things that we amass. And it's not that work isn't important, super important, but why do we have this insistent need on more?
Yeah. And
kind of like hoard it together. And I think it's really because we don't trust. First of all, we think we have control over all this stuff, which we do not. And we think that, and we just simply don't trust that tomorrow's going to be okay. I have to make tomorrow okay, when tomorrow is not even here. And I think the roots of that, I think, run deep. But if we just had enough, we don't have to create all of this stuff around us.
No. And as you said, that very materialistic picture has been created very much from a Western position, and it's been driven, if we go back to what we said in the first place about education, it's been driven by this ambitious model of, if you get straight A's, if you get to this college, if you get to work in this company, if you get to live at this zip code, you have a house that looks like that. It's all an external, as you said, validation. And it's almost, it's quite, it's egocentric in the sense of it's all self-sufficient and self-fulfilling, should I say. And then also, as you said, internally, a whole heap of those people wouldn't be happy, and they wouldn't feel very together, and so on and so forth. Which is why, when you travel and you do go to countries where people have less, and they on the surface to the west would look like they're struggling, but actually, because they have family and they have food and they have water and they have shelter, they are happy genuinely, because they're not scrolling social media all day, they're not comparing, and they're not feeling like, well, let's compare what grades we got and what kind of car we're driving and so on. And it's a very interesting thing. And I think what sprung to mind when you said that about I will control it and make today better, is also, it is a space in conscious leadership that talks about above the line and below the line. And it's something that I always come back to, because I think when you have that image, it really helps you have an awareness of where you're at. So below the line is basically saying that when we're in some kind of unconscious state, and above the line is a conscious state. Below the line is where we get that label where we say, poor me. So people will say, well, life's happening to me. So this has happened to me, that's happened to me, this is all against me, my family never get, it's all that kind of mindset. We go to the next one, which can be much more your people that are more ambitious, more, want to go out there and seize the world. So this is like, life's happening by me. So as you said, control, I'm going to make this happen. I can do this. I can sort of smash it down. But that's still an unconsciousness. When we go above the line, the next one along is kind of like life's happening through me. So this is a bit more kind of on the spiritual path, where people are trying to be more in flow and trying to have life coming through them. But it still can create separation and ego, because then you can get people trying to say things like, I channeled this, or I'm special because I've been given this. And they're still trying to sort of, separate themselves. When we go to the sort of the final point, which is as me, if life happens as me, then if we think about nature and we think about a flower, a tree, a plant, a bird, or anything, it just is. It doesn't try to change it. It doesn't wake up as a particular flower, then go, oh, this flower's not really good enough, I've decided I want to be that tree over there. It's the fact that it's all as me. And I think we miss that trick from nature, that if we're the same thing, that we're all acorns or we're all flowers, seeds, plants, or whatever, then if nature or the universe is happening as me, then you are everything you needed to be from birth. The rest, as we've just said, is an external construct, an external set of rules that we have absorbed. And we could say, unwillingly to some extent, because children don't necessarily opt into this. And then we become some byproduct of it. And I think going back to what you said about purpose and meaning, is we then as adults, we have to make a conscious choice to almost unlearn all that and kind of take a few steps backwards.
Well, totally. I like what you talk about. We as adults, we have to unlearn all of that. And you found that true with all the people that you talk about or talk to, and I find it as well. Yeah. We hit the point where these constructs that we've been living by just don't hold water. That you push person to the extreme, and like most of this stuff just falls apart. And we long for something deeper. We actually want to believe this idea of life happens as me, and life is happening around me, and life is happening right now, and we're okay, and I've got enough, and everything's fine. And tomorrow, we'll get to tomorrow when tomorrow comes. It's totally fine. And people want to live like that. It really deep down. And it takes sometimes a bit of suffering to break away some of these other constructs, which, we cling to, we grasp, we hold on very tightly, that are not as strong as we give, as we think they are, but what they can change overnight. Like, they sure can. And instead just kind of through that barrier where people get to the point where it's like, I have to rethink this, my existence in a way. There is rest, there is peace, there is joy, there is connectedness, and the struggle, the day-to-day, need to prove, it goes away. It's like, what are we doing this for anyhow? I'm not certain. It's not paying off.
And what you said that, I think, is because it's been fundamentally driven by fear, hasn't it? So it's that fear of, so that control thing comes from fear, doesn't it? So if we're not certain and we are fearful and people don't know what's happening, and depending on what's happening in the media any particular time in history, it could be anything can come up, and the people immediately go into a fear state. And then from that fear state, all these other biological responses and everything starts to happen. And the first thing out the window is kind of like logical thinking, isn't it? Because now it's a fear and it's a panic. And, we see it in every kind of crisis, don't we? The crazy things that happen, and people just aren't thinking straight. And that
So,
is...
Yeah. So do you do anything on TikTok at all?
I don't at the minute. I've been wanting to, but I haven't.
Okay. You might enjoy it. It's interesting. You probably have a good voice to speak to people. Set up a TikTok channel or whatever. It's interesting to me that on TikTok there's a varied number of voices, obviously, and some of those are about mindfulness, right? Like really thinking, and we're like, well, how are we gonna, what are some strategies to kind of make it through the day, take on the day, and a lot of those to the title of this chat, the warrior and the sage, there are some of them are, would be considered sages, let's say. And the comments that people put into the videos, it's striking to me that, and this is not anything new, but it stands out to me that what we tend to do as individuals, and it's just humans, is we look to the sage and we say, I can't be you, but give me a piece of your wisdom so that I can go continue living my life in a little bit better way. Like, I'm stressed out over here in my job and with my family and all this other stuff. And so give me a little piece. I'm not going to accept all of you. I'm not going to live like you, the sage, because that's extreme. That's crazy. But I'll take a little piece of that and, pixie dust or whatever, and sprinkle it over my stressful existence over here, and think that it's going to be less stressful. And it will be to a point, but you've got it. It's interesting that we as humans are resistant to significant life change until something comes along and just whacks us right out of the existence that we've been living in, that has been not working a lot of times, like to this idea of the Western culture stuff. Their mental suicides are at an all-time high.
Absolutely.
Not good. No, right? This idea of disconnectedness and loneliness, and children even struggling with significant mental health issues that were not present, 50 years ago, all-time high.
Absolutely.
Even though we have more ability to connect than we've ever had. We have more stuff than we've ever had. We have more money than we've ever had. All of these things, all these trappings, I think, of what we believe our existence to be about, or we get lost in, clearly is not what existence is supposed to be. Because if you go to cultures around the world where they have tight-knit social groups, they don't have access to all the stuff. Happiness actually is higher over there. They don't have mental health issues that we have. They don't have suicides like we've got. We are destroying ourselves because we are not treating ourselves as humans. We are treating ourselves, I think, as widgets to some degree, like widgets in some big machine. And I'm here to create something today. It's like, no, relax for a moment. You're here to live your life with the person right next to you, and that, go explore the creek. And if today you're, and it's not that I'm not, anti-job. I think people should have jobs and do stuff and all those things, but we are focused, I think, or too highly focused on the wrong things, and driving ourselves quite literally mad.
Absolutely. Yeah. The first thing that sprung to my mind as you were saying that was that old Pink Floyd song about being comfortably numb. And it made me think, because that's how people are, by and large, it's this comfortable numbness. And as you say, one of two things has to happen: either an extreme pain, crisis, trauma, tragedy that sort of snaps you out of it and you go, hang on a minute, no. Or maybe the idea of, when we talk about consciousness, is that you start to look around you and start to go, is this is this really what it's all about? And I think, as we talked about cultures, it doesn't surprise me, because you just mentioned that about the networks and the support systems and so on and so forth. And it's almost like it is really a crazy idea, but it's almost like we systematically broke down and destroyed everything that was good for us, and then replaced it with this kind of automated, robotic kind of existence. And then we're suddenly going, okay, we don't quite like this. When as you said, the technology by itself and in and of itself is not a bad thing, but it is if it's at the cost of human relationships. So this whole show that you have, Coffee with Humans, is because the human connection is what's missing. And as you said about people writing on posts, I wasn't sure which direction you was going to go with that, with the writing on posts, because people put out material and you see every type of comment going. And sometimes I think a lot of us have interestingly read threads where different conversations are going on, because you can't quite believe what people are saying. And it's quite interesting, the comments, and it gives you a good sort of temperature of that collective on certain topics. And
yeah,
it is always really quite illuminating.
I've got a I've got a quote here I'm going to throw up on the screen, which I think is very fascinating. It'll be interesting. I'm curious to hear what you.
Okay.
I'm going to go find it here. I got to figure out how to put this on the screen. I have to toy around with the layout.
Oh, okay.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you see that at all? Hold on. Let me try and make this font bigger. Boop. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition, when infinite joy is offered to us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. C.S. Lewis.
What did you have underneath that? I thought you had something.
It's the dedication actually for my book. This book is dedicated to those who feel there must be more and dream of what could be.
Okay, right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing there, because that's a bit of a juxtaposition, isn't it? Because somebody could read that and say, well, hang on a minute, isn't that the antithesis of what you were just talking about there, in the sense of you saying about ambition and this and that and the other? But it isn't, because there's a difference between an inner self-love, creative expression of the individual versus an external ego-based one, based on what you said earlier about not being enough, not being good enough, not being validated, not being acknowledged. Completely different paths. It's almost like having one map the right way around and then reading another map the reverse way around and trying to get to the same destination. And it's where we start from. And I think that's the thing that's missed. And when we go to education and we go to things, we're somehow fundamentally not taught any of the things that are actually hugely impactful for us. So the things like the connecting and the communicating and what we actually need to take care of ourselves, and to actually be able to come from that place of, as you said, if you've got a full tank, so if you are full of self-love, self-esteem, confidence and the rest of it. And again, we're not talking about an egocentric driven narcissist here. We're talking about somebody in a simplistic kind of holistic way. Then you go out from that place, you're going to arrive at a completely different direction and destination to the person who's unhappy, unhealthy, negative, hates themselves, whatever. And then they need to go out and create things and kind of bang on the drum and look at me and look what I've achieved and look where I live and look how many billions of dollars I've got. And it's just a completely different manifestation of the human.
Yes. Warren Buffett, arguably, the greatest investor of, 20th century. One of the things that he talks about is when finding, first of all, two major things. He says, you're going to be, one of the most important decisions you're going to make in your life is who you're going to spend your life with. And so he says, in that quest, that's going to be your mate. So put thought into that. He says, but he also talks about how, through the education system, you're taught to figure out what you might want to do for work, but you're not taught who you might want to spend your life with. And he says that's an interesting, he doesn't say it's failure, but it's got, kind of a failure of culture. Two is he talks about when you're looking for your work, find the thing that you would do if you were never going to get paid for it. You're never going to get paid. You're never going to get fame. What would you do? Go do that. Because, and this actually couples with their investment strategy. They have a nearly 100% success rate on which businesses Berkshire Hathaway acquires. And one of the key elements is when they acquire a business, they determine with the current owner of that business whether that owner loves the business or loves the money they're getting from the business. And if they love the money they're getting from the business, they do not buy. And if the owner loves the business and the money comes second, they'll that basically is the big green check mark, because it tells you fundamentally what that person cares about, right? And so when we express ourselves in our work, what are we doing that we love? We would do it if we weren't going to get paid for it. Go do that, because you can go find money for that. You let the money come. You will have enough. You will feel like enough. You will have joy. And, and from a long-term investment strategy, through the ups and downs of life, you will continue to do that. That will drive you forward, even if the money, ebbs and flows, just like, the Buffett investment strategy. That owner's going to stick it out because they love the business. The money, we can figure the money out, but you can't change a person's love or passion if it's just not there. No. But love and passion will stick it out over the long term. So real interesting thoughts, just from a very practical standpoint.
Very much so.
But it's difficult. It's difficult. Takes experience, I think, to come to that conclusion. It takes a lot of trust. If you're a younger person, it takes a lot of trust to believe that principle is true, and then put that into practice early on in life. Whereas most people discover that way too late. And then they go, what have I been doing with my existence? And then, and they're off. We're offered a new day. Today is new. Absolutely. Go do something different if you've not been doing what you love. But it's interesting to try and change that later in life.
It is, and I think as well the interesting factor of that, again, when we go back to community and historically, is where did we lose that? Because at some point in our evolution, we knew to be out in nature. We knew to take care. We knew to have community. We knew all these things. So a lot of the things that we've lost touch of isn't because we didn't know them. We did know them. So it always interests me. I mean, I know we could get into another sort of 5-hour debate here about the sort of the industrialization and like you said, governments and big corporates and money and power and all the rest of it. But essentially, again, this is going back to what we said about the constructs and the rules, is almost like you do have to take your own, whether you want to call it taking your own power back or taking your own purpose back or whatever, but it is got to be down to you. And interesting what you said about the partner. There's three things there, isn't there? There's one that you got to live with yourself the most. so you really better have a good relationship with yourself first and foremost before anybody else. And also the thing about love, whichever format love comes in, is that's not something that can be taught, and it's not a thing that you can say to somebody, oh, go to this class for so many weeks and you'll pick this up. People either have that love and passion or they don't. And whilst that might on the surface seem difficult to attain because it's an unknown, on the other hand, it's easy through a discernment list when it comes to what you said about passion, purpose, and things that you want to do. Because just go and try a bunch of things out. You'll find out very, very quickly what you don't like. It's really quick. You'll go like, oh yeah, I tried that and that was really not for me. Or you could try something else and unravel something like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I'd actually find that particular thing interesting. And what you said earlier about the education system, that's a similar thing, because unless you have the experiences, how do you know? You don't. And so you need to go and explore and have all those things. And rather than people seeing it as a failing, I always like to say that, create a discernment list, because you need to know what doesn't feel right as much as what feels right. Because if we're just always constantly going for the unicorns and rainbows, I mean, we've got nothing to contrast it by, have we?
Yeah, for sure. These are deep topics and ones that people philosophers have turned over and over, and wise people have known about for thousands of years. And we teach a new generation, maybe two generations now, are relearning some of these lessons in light of technology and availability of information, availability of travel, and all sorts of things. So, tell you what, we're at the end of our time. People can get in contact with you at facebook.com/the Quantum Dojo.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I kind of do. What wise words would you like to close the warrior and the stage stop for tea? What wise words would you love to leave our audience with?
Okay, well, I'd say from the warrior side, that is really about you keeping true to yourself. Be who you came here to be you, do you, and you need a bit of warrior essence to do that. The sage would be listen to your intuition, listen to your heart, and follow your own advice. And then also, meet up with other like-minded people and form groups and connections and work and, causes and things that, sing true for you. And the tea part, I would say, is make sure you stop for a rest.
I love that. I love it. I was wondering. That's cool. I'm glad you incorporated tea right at the end. Well, thanks so much, Annette, for joining me on Coffee with Humans. It's been a really great time.
Yeah, great. Lovely to talk to you today.
Well, to our viewers and listeners, Coffee with Humans is a live streamed conversation between strangers who become friends. And we've been discussing for the past 45 minutes or so, the warrior and the sage. Stop for tea. We've discussed consciousness and how we express our consciousness and our humanness in the world. And are we enough? Can we be enough? How do we come across, how do we come out in the workplace? And how do we get along with others and ourselves? A lot of deep conversation there. So catch us next time on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, and more. And we'll see you later. One of the things I love about Coffee with Humans are the raw conversations I get to have, meeting new people just like you. If you or someone you know should be on Coffee with Humans, go to coffeewithhumans.com. Remember, the only rule is no sales calls. This has been Coffee with Humans. Subscribe to get updates or click to have coffee with me. coffeewithhumans.com.